Now, when I use the word the silence, I'm referring to what is often called meditation. I prefer the term silence because it is still unspoiled. Meditation as a word has been so contaminated with all kinds of notions and philosophies and techniques as to almost lose its real validity. Today there are dozens of exotic techniques available to one who wants to meditate. This style, that style, sometimes depending upon how much you pay to get the course, but it's involved in this technique and that technique, and you sit and you do this and you go through certain positions and you learn to reflect upon your navel and all these things which are so much a part of Eastern techniques. But the emphasis is normally on the how. And often there's a debate about the correct procedure. I always like to quote the great yoga master Aurobindo, who says it's not necessary to tell anyone how to meditate. If he's sincere enough and open enough, he will find the way. So the technique can be a distraction, you see. Quite often, meditation that is entered into in a technical sense, using the correct procedure, stops short of a spiritual process and becomes a very helpful therapy for relaxation and overcoming stress, and this is fine, and who's going to fault this? But it does not become a part of the process of spiritual prayer, because there may well be no centering of consciousness at the very center of your being. See, true meditation, or as I'm terming it, the silence, is not going somewhere. It's not reaching something. It's not even reaching for something. It's giving up the very desire to reach. And this requires a great change in consciousness, because most of us are doers. You know, we want to get it done. So I want to meditate. I want to use the right technique, and I want to get there. So there's a tendency to unconsciously try to reach up and up and up into the very levels of consciousness up here somewhere. When you finally get to the top, then you sit there and say, hey, I really made it, didn't I? I had a mind-blowing experience. You may have blown your mind, but you haven't blown God's mind. You haven't gotten any closer to spiritual reality than you were in the beginning, because God isn't up there on top of the mountain. God is the depth within you. Enter into the inner chamber and close the door. So you're not reaching for something. The need is to give up the very desire to reach. The presence of God is not something to get into or something that you can fall out of. The presence is present here and now. Any attempt to find or to reach the presence is to practice the absence of God. We want to practice the presence, not the absence. If you're talking to God, reaching for God, meditating to get into a higher consciousness up here somewhere, then you're practicing the absence of God. The need is to practice the presence of God. I like to make a distinction for the purpose of practice between meditation, or the silence if you prefer, and prayer. Meditation is concentration at the center. Prayer is the concentration of thought from the center. And we get this quite clear. The one is centering yourself at the point within you which is God expressing as you, not doing anything, not trying to help anyone, to heal anyone, not projecting it, just knowing it. This is meditation. This is the silence. This is inner prayer. And what we call prayer, the affirmation, the treatment, is a projection of this consciousness. This is something else, very important and very real. In the one case, we get centered, we know our oneness, we get the feeling of wholeness, allness at the center, just the peace, and get this feeling of that Plotinus expresses when he says, the whole universe rushes, streams, and pours into me from all sides while I just sit quiet. Just know this. But prayer, as we normally think of it, is the projection of this consciousness. So then, out of this awareness, I look upon the thing that I'm concerned about, not with my eyes open, but I center my attention upon it, and I see the light of this inner power flowing forth. I don't make it go forth, but I see it going forth, just like turning a spotlight upon something, you see, coming out of that centered awareness. But the important thing is that always, we need to begin with this consciousness of inner centering. As I say, this is the missing link in most metaphysical prayer treatment. Because most of us think of prayer and treatment simply as a matter of mouthing a lot of words. Always the very first step should be still and know that I am God. Forget about the problem for a moment. If you want to, if you're going to have a prayer time, write on a piece of paper the concerns, the persons, the situations, the job relationship, or the problem with your boss, or difficulties in the office. Write it down so that you'll be aware of it. Even write any affirmative thoughts that you may want to use relative to that, if you care to. Lay it aside, and with that totally out of your mind, just be still and enter into a consciousness of inner centering, as if you didn't have a care in the world. Now that's not easy, that takes practice. Just go down into the well of inner consciousness. Center yourself. Get the feeling that the whole universe is already working through you. And remember, you don't have to pray to God. God is praying for you. So be still and listen. Just be relaxed. Be receptive. You might say, but what do I do? What do I say? Don't do or say anything. You see, true silence or prayer is not doing. It is not doing. It's not doing something, but it is not doing. Understand that? It's the exact opposite. That's why it takes discipline. Just be still and listen. Get the feeling that the whole universe is pouring into you. Tremendous power, love, substance, and intelligence is pouring into you like the charge going into a battery while the battery just sits. The battery doesn't have consciousness, so it doesn't resist. And now say, hey, I got to start these cars. It just accepts. So think of yourself as a battery, accepting, receiving, storing up as the infilling process of spirit flows into you as you center yourself at the point of consciousness. You don't think of drain or strain or emptiness. You think only of wholeness and fullness. How long? There's no time in spirit. 15 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, not too long because the consciousness begins to stray. Actually, a matter of a few minutes is about all you need. But always let that be the starting point of all kinds of prayer, treatment, affirmation, anything. Always take time to create the condition that makes the result inevitable, to get the light switch turned on, to remember that it is not my power, but the power of spirit flowing through me. Make contact with the power.